Hello and welcome back to the fifth and final section of this Platform App Builder exam prep. And this is going to be app deployment, which is going to take up 10% of your exam. Today we'll be going through all the bullet points found in the Trailhead exam guide, talk through what to expect, what to be prepared for, so that you can do well on this section of the exam. So let's jump into it. The first bullet point is, given a set of business requirements, recommend a solution for key milestones and considerations when managing the application lifecycle and various types of sandboxes. So we're going to split this up into two sections here. We're going to split this up into the application lifecycle, and then we'll get into sandboxes, what they are, and the different types of sandboxes that you want for different projects that you're going to be running. Now, when we talk application lifecycle, we're talking about the important steps needed to go from a planning phase all the way to a release phase, where you actually release the app or what you've built in various sandboxes, and you release that to a live production instance. So we want to talk about several of the steps that are needed and found there and those key milestones. And if I'm being completely transparent, the best possible article that I found on this is found here on the SaaS Guru website. I'll link this in the video description here, but this is by far the best article that I've seen that talks about, the different steps within the typical app development lifecycle, as well as key milestones. So, when we talk about the application lifecycle, it may look slightly different at all companies, but really it's the same type of structure. You go from the planning your release, where you gather requirements, you understand what needs to be built, really the different orgs that you're going to be using, the different sandboxes you're going to be using, etc., down to the actual build, where you actually have the team go in and build what's been planned. You build the application, you build whatever customization is needed, where it's needed in the sandbox that's needed. And then obviously you go on to test, and then you go ahead and create and aggregate all of those things after you've tested appropriately. And we'll talk about change sets, which is a way that you can actually build these releases and release them. And then you do want to make sure that you test that wherever it's going, make sure the integrations and just really any regression testing is needed, and then make the release. So make sure you can deploy that to production, and then make sure you monitor and do effective training for those that will be using this new app. So that's very high level, very quickly what the application lifecycle looks like. Really just know that, it's about planning, it's about developing, test, and then make sure that you release it. And understand, if you haven't done this before, particularly with Salesforce or any type of technology, try to think of it of just planning a party, right? You need to first, okay, how many chairs do I need? Where do I want to do this party? Who's it for? Who's invited? Okay, great. Now let's go to a venue. Let's go talk with different vendors. Let's get the chairs. Let's set up the party. Let's make sure everything's going to work. And then let's have the party, right? So it's pretty simple, but you just want to make sure in this part that you understand the different steps that are needed as part of the application development lifecycle. Now, what is important as we continue on with this article are the key milestones in the application development lifecycle. So these are things that need to happen in these different steps. And so again, you just want to be familiar. This article is wonderful. Read through it. Think through examples, but this article is great in helping you understand, okay, what needs to happen in each step. Obviously the plan phase is I'm gathering requirements. I should not be gathering requirements as I'm down here maybe doing testing. That doesn't make sense. If I'm at the party, I don't want to then be thinking about how many chairs do I need at the party when I'm already setting up, the vendors, the drinks and the food, and I don't have chairs. That doesn't make sense, right? So just understand the different things that need to happen at each step. So in this case, gathering functional requirements and planning, you're actually designing this application for business specifications, working with stakeholders, making sure that you have buy-in, and so understanding the steps that are in, or understanding the actual actions and milestones that are in each step. And so again, this is just great outline. Highly recommend this article. This talks about those milestones, and then it goes on to talk a little more specific about, types of releases. You don't really need to know that a ton. And then down here, talking about with multiple sandboxes. Again, you may see something that talks about different types of sandboxes or using this development cycle with multiple sandboxes. Really, you just want to understand what sandboxes are available and when to use them. So again, these top two sections are critical for the test for this section. It is only 10% of the exam, so you won't see a lot of questions, but just understand, think of it like you're planning a party. What are the steps to plan a party, and what is typically needed in each step? Make sure that you understand those phases and understand the key milestones that are typically involved in those phases. Okay, so part 2 of this bullet point is talking about the different sandboxes that are available. Now, today we're going to talk about sandboxes, and later on we're going to talk about change sets. If I'm being completely honest, this can be a little more difficult if you're new to Salesforce, because if I'm in my free developer org, if I go to the setup side, we've been able to kind of look on setup and search through whatever principle we're talking about. But with the nature of developer orgs, really there are no option to have or see different sandboxes or to look at inbound or outbound change sets, which we'll talk in a bit. So sandboxes can sometimes be a little more difficult to picture if you haven't actually been able to see them and see how they're created. But really great resources here are 2 help articles from Salesforce that talk about the different types. So really the main thing you need to know are what are the names of the sandbox types, and then what are the limitations of the sandboxes, because then that will help you understand when to use them. So really you need to know that there's 4 kinds. There's developer sandbox, which really this free developer org is a great example of that. We have a developer pro sandbox, we have the partial copy, and then we have a full sandbox. Those are the 4 different sandboxes that you need to know. This is great here. This talks about what are typically done in these sandboxes. The other piece about sandboxes that are important are what typically come with the additions of Salesforce, and then the sizes of sandboxes. So we see here, depending on your Salesforce edition, professional, enterprise, unlimited, or performance, they typically come with a set of sandboxes. You can purchase them additionally, but for example, we see here, if you only have enterprise, you're really only going to have 25 developer sandboxes and 1 partial copy, right? So just try to be familiar with this on when full sandboxes are typically out of the box given from Salesforce, depending on your edition. This is a wonderful reference here with the 4 different sandboxes and what the limitations are for each sandbox. So here we have the refresh interval. This is very important because you may see a question on, I need a refresh within X amount of days. Which sandboxes are able to do that? What a refresh interval means is when Sandbox takes a copy from whatever instance of Salesforce, it could be another sandbox or it could be production instance, it has a certain amount of time that you can do that again. And by refresh, it is going and taking that blank slate from wherever it's originating. So if I have a developer sandbox and I'm taking it from production instance, I can only do that every day. And so if I build something or if I release something and I want to go get and refresh my sandbox and take that blank slate and refresh my sandbox, I can do it every day. Whereas partial copies every 5 days, full sandbox every 29 days. So that's how quickly you can refresh your sandboxes. The storage limits, this is quite important. Luckily, these numbers are pretty round and easy, but be aware and just keep in mind, developer is the smallest, developer pro up to 1 gig, partial copy 5, and full sandbox is the same as your production. Now what's copied, right? When we talk about metadata and data, metadata are the fields, the objects that are in Salesforce, right? Whereas the data are the actual names of clients or contacts or opportunity data, right? Whereas if we think about an opportunity, the metadata is simply the fields, right? The opportunity name, the close date, the amount, and the data are the values of those fields. So it would be XYZ opportunity, close date of November 15th, or amount of $10,000, right? That's data. So know that the Developer Sandbox and Developer Pro are only metadata. When you do a refresh and you have a fresh sandbox of Developer Pro, there are no records. There is no data in those sandboxes. You typically need to create those yourself so that you can do all your tests. But with partial copy, right, you have all the metadata and you have the sample data, hence partial copy. And full sandbox is just a full replication of production, hence why it has all metadata and all data. So these are very important, just understanding the different sandboxes, the sizes, and what type of data and metadata is copied into those sandboxes. Now, the second bullet point is given a use case, demonstrate knowledge, viability, and troubleshooting when using change sets. So let's talk a little bit about change sets and what they are. So as we talk about our application lifecycle, right? We go from our planning, our designing, and then our actual building. Our building we're typically doing in a sandbox. So let's say in this example, we are building in a developer sandbox, and then I want to then push that to a partial copy and then push that to a full copy for different testing all the way to production, right? From my first sandbox, the one I am building, and I am building this app in my developer sandbox. Once I have everything built, I've tested everything, I've done my tests, I want to push it to the next sandbox, that partial copy sandbox. I need to bring all of those things together and package it together. And so the change set is bringing together all of those components, which could be custom object, lots of custom fields, maybe a flow, some Apex. It's putting all of those together so I can send them to the sandbox at the same time. Now, there are a lot of DevOps tools out there. You have the DevOps Center, you have Gear Set, you have a lot of third-party tools and tools that do that. Change sets are really the most basic one. It makes it so you can package what you've built and push it to the other sandbox without having to just build it again in that sandbox. Now let's talk about how we aggregate all of this, right? We have what we've built. We want to go ahead and send that off. Now this is going to show up in your outbound change sets if you're using change sets. And so here we have on this screen, we're showing, okay, where are we going to send this change set? Here's where we are currently. Let's go ahead and send this to a connected organization. You're going to build that change set, and then you're going to go ahead and look to add different components to that change set. So here's where you want to go ahead and set. You want to add, if you're building an app, you may have a custom object, some custom fields, maybe a flow, some Apex, whatever that might be. This is where you actually add those components to the change set. You're packaging everything that you've built, bringing it all in one place so you can send it all at one time. And so this is what the outbound change set allows you to do. It allows you to aggregate all of that information. So know that you are able to do this. You're able to look on dependencies. For example, I can add a custom object. Then I can go and look at view and add dependencies, and it'll have all of the fields associated with that custom object. So I'm able to add it much easier there. Also understand that these components need to also be familiar with the profiles and understand the profile settings and how that can be affected as you push change sets. So for example, if I have a field, but I don't include maybe a profile there, it may, kind of alter the field level security of that field for that profile. So know that you have to add the components and you also need to add those profiles. So now that I have the outbound change set, I've brought all that together. I want to send it off. And so the receiving connected org is going to receive an inbound change set. So we see here, this is this organization, and I'm receiving this from a connected organization. So it'll show me, okay, which ones are awaiting deployment and which ones are already deployed, right? And so when you receive it, what's important is that after you receive it, you need to make sure that you validate it, and then you can deploy it, or essentially make sure that it is live and goes live into that org. So know that when you validate, there are tests that typically need to be run and should be run to make sure that whatever you've built, right, it worked well when you built it. Let's run some tests to make sure that it's going to run well and not interfere with things in the organization that you've pushed it to. So let's make sure that you aren't maybe missing fields that are required for a flow or a validation rule or anything. So we have these different tests. Be familiar with these type of tests that you can run. There are some great resources here. Just talking about change set best practices. This is a help article from Salesforce talking about just what to do and what to look out for. And as I mentioned, you want to validate these change sets before deployment. So let's go ahead and review this as well. I'll link this as well and make sure that you're familiar on how change sets work and understand best time to use them, and make sure that you're packaging and sending and validating wherever it's been received. Something that does happen quite often is, let's say you've packaged it, you send it over, they go to validate it, and it fails. For whatever reason, maybe you missed a field, right? When you send it off, what you have to do is you have to go back to the developer org where you built it. You have to then clone that change set and add that field and re-upload it back over. You can't just send that one field, because if it fails a change set, it won't push any of that live. You want to make sure that you bundle it all again and resend everything, including, maybe what you were missing with that error when you validated. You want to send it all back over. So you got to clone that outbound change set and send it over. Now, I know that this can seem like a lot, but again, we want to make sure that we're understanding how this works. So if we're using that party example, let's say we have a big party coming up at a certain venue, but we get all the chairs, we get everything, and we do it in our backyard. So we build it all in our backyard just to make sure everything works, the chairs, the DJ, the drinks, the food. And then we're like, okay, on the day of, we have it all ready. Let's put it in some trucks. Let's send it that morning of the party. Let's go ahead and make sure as we pull it out of the truck, do we have all the chairs? Do we have all the equipment, etc.? If we don't, we got to send that truck back, pick up what was missing, and then bring it back to the venue to then unload. Let's validate everything, and then let's put it all out on the lawn and let's have a good party. So again, outbound, inbound change sets. Understand those troubleshooting. When you have an issue, you do have to send that truck back. You got to clone and re-upload back to the receiving organization. The third bullet point here is describe the use cases and considerations when using unmanaged and managed packages. So we just talked quite a bit about change sets, right? Change sets, I'm able to build an app, I can compile that app and send it to one other instance at a time of Salesforce, whether it's a sandbox or production. So I built everything in my developer org, I'm gonna push it all to my partial copy. I can do that at one time. Now that's a change set. Now let's talk about unmanaged and managed packages. Again, these are packages that you're able to send from one place to another. Now, let's talk about the difference between managed and unmanaged packages. Managed packages and unmanaged packages are just like change sets in the fact that they are used to distribute applications from one instance to another. Managed packages are typically used by Salesforce partners to distribute or sell applications to Salesforce users. A perfect example of this is the Salesforce App Exchange. If we go to the actual Salesforce App Exchange, we see here most of these, if not all, are going to be managed packages. Here on the App Exchange, these are managed packages that are really applications that they want to then distribute to Salesforce organizations, often selling them or simply putting them through as managed packages. These are, again, packages built somewhere that they want to then distribute. Now, we call them managed because they are managed by whoever built them. So in this example here, we have this SurveyMonkey for Salesforce built by SurveyMonkey. They will manage this. They will make any necessary updates or improvements that can then also be distributed to the Salesforce orgs that have it installed. A big difference on managed packages are going to be the ability to customize them. Because this is managed and built by SurveyMonkey, and it's installed as a managed package in my Salesforce organization, there's very little I can do to customize that. A great way to visualize this is if I go here, I'm going to go into the installed packages, and we're going to see here a few different components that we can take a look at. So for example, I have a few packages installed in just this Trailhead org here, developer org, and it even says here these are managed packages. So let me check a few of these and just check it out what they are. So if we go to view components, I'm seeing that there are several apps, right? So maybe, I want to take a look and maybe see some of these apps and see what tabs I can add. So let me check the other one I have here, which is the Trailhead Playground. So if I click into it, there's more components here that I've installed. It's managed package. And let's actually look at these tabs. This might be a good way to see it. So this is a tab that we can create. But here we have this message that says this custom tab definition is managed, meaning you may only edit certain attributes. Again, this is a managed package. I'm not really able to edit this much. The upgrades will obviously happen on the side that it was built. So from the App Exchange. So that's a managed package. And that's a really big difference between managed and unmanaged. Managed package, you go to App Exchange, you install it, and you're not able to customize it much because they're managing it. Now, an unmanaged package is something that can be created and really sent out. So let's say, for example, I download a certain package, I bring it in, but because it's an unmanaged package, I would be able to edit it and customize it quite a bit. And this allows me to make sure that I make customizations to it. Obviously, the con there is that I have to make sure that the updates, that it stays in line with things that are happening within my org, builds I've been having, and so I am on the onus to update and manage it because it's unmanaged. Now, a great example of this, and something you may see very great question is, let's say that you're having a really large building session within your team, and you have multiple team members. They all have their own developer sandbox that they need to do their part of this build, but you have a certain, let's call it an object with some fields that you want to send out to all of those sandboxes. Instead of a change set to send it to all the different ones, I want to do it as an unmanaged package, which then they can go ahead and install within their developer org all at the same time. So through an unmanaged package, I've packaged that, I can send it off and allow them to then make those edits to any of the components that were part of the unmanaged package. Some great words on this is knowing that these are going to be open source. Really, they're the building blocks. These unmanaged packages, you're allowed to push those out as different templates to those different developer orgs that they can go ahead and customize depending on the project. So those are managed packages and unmanaged packages. Now, the fourth and final bullet point is, given a scenario, determine the appropriate deployment plan. So when we talk about this, we really want to try and just bring everything together. And just when you see a scenario, you understand, okay, what's going to be needed here of my deployment plan. Do I need certain sandboxes, and do I need to push from developer to partial to full to the production? Should I use a change set? Should I use a managed package or an unmanaged package? And throughout the entire process, let's make sure that we're still following the application lifecycle, right? We're planning, we're designing, we're building and developing, and we're testing. So it's important to bring these together because when we talk about the pieces we've already discussed in this video, we have pieces of the deployment plan. Now I want to bring them together and understand what variables we want to use for our certain development plan based on the requirements. Now, a great resource bringing this all together is an article on Salesforce Ben talking about how to prepare for a large-scale Salesforce deployment. Highly recommend you read it and go through and make sure you understand these principles, map it out in your mind or however you would like. But really, it just talks about the different methods. In this case, we really only need to talk about the change sets. This goes through and talks again a little bit about change sets, how they work. Kind of smaller companies, you bring things together, et cetera. Then there are talking about metadata, API, as well as the AMP migration. Don't need to worry about those, particularly for this test. But other things that are important, certain time that you want to do it, making sure that you understand when to use a full sandbox or not, doing the different tests and audits, making sure that you have email deliverability to make sure people aren't getting a bunch of emails from sandboxes. And so this is a great resource to go through, make sure that you're bringing all of these pieces together. When we talk about the steps that are needed, the milestones needed, and then the tools that you need for this development process, whether it is the change set you're talking about, whether it is a managed or unmanaged, what should I use in this case? Is there something already on the App Exchange? And what's my sandbox process? Where do I need to build this? Does the sandbox I have meet the requirements? Is it big enough? Do I need some test data from my production org, et cetera? So make sure that you review everything that we've talked about. And as you see scenarios pop up, let's go ahead and take a mental checklist. Okay, based on the requirements of this scenario, can I rule out any sandboxes? Can I rule out, managed or unmanaged or change set. And let's make sure that I understand my deployment plan based on this scenario. So this concludes the fifth and final section for the Platform App Builder exam guide. I hope this series has been helpful. Let me know if you have any questions or comments. Please make sure that you are trying your best to get some hands-on practice. I know it's a little more difficult with this part based on change sets and sandboxes, but review all of the material Salesforce puts out there, and I'll link everything we've talked about so far. And I hope you do great on this section of the exam, 10%. It'll only be a few questions, but importantly, you ace this part of the exam. Best of luck, and I'll catch you in the next one. Bye.